What's wrong?
Goldie got sick this morning. That's 5 sick goldfish in a month. Goldie, Slimmy Goldberg, the Goldfather, Goldilocks, and Kevin.
5 goldfish in a month? What have you been feeding them?
Just fish food, some ice cream, pizza. It's too much, isn't it?
I think that's too much for people. It's okay, Izzy. We got something for you. This is called an ecosphere. It's a completely sealed glass sphere. It's got water, air, shrimp, algae, and bacteria.
Wow, so these organisms have everything they need right there in the sphere.
And you don't even have to add food. So what do we call this?
Easy proof.
Or we call it an ecosystem. Let's dive in. I'm Dr. Jeff Finneker, and today we're going to explore the science of ecosystems. We'll learn that an ecosystem is a community of interacting organisms and their environment. That organisms can only survive in an ecosystem when their specific needs are met. A healthy ecosystem has many different kinds of organisms. And newly introduced organisms can throw off the balance of an ecosystem. With Dr. Jeff. Welcome to Labracazam, where we make science make sense.
So tell us, Dr. Jeff, what exactly is an ecosystem?
An ecosystem is a community of interacting organisms and their environment.
Oh, so like me interacting with my couch and TV, eating seafood last night?
Not quite. An ecosystem describes an area where living things interact with each other and also with non-living things like soil, water, and air. In an ecosystem, each organism has its own role to play. And it can be as small as your backyard or as big as the ocean. Let's look at our sealed ecosphere as an example. In our ecosphere, light energy helps the algae grow. The algae is then eaten by the shrimp. When the shrimp poop, tiny bacteria in the water feed on it. The bacteria then convert that poop to nutrients that help the algae grow.
Wow, it's like a cycle.
Exactly. However, if the needs of the organisms aren't met, the balance of the ecosystem can be destroyed. For instance, if there was no light, the algae wouldn't grow. That means the shrimp would die since they wouldn't have any algae to eat. And if the shrimp stopped pooping, the bacteria die too.
So everything in an ecosystem interacts and depends on each other for survival.
Labracazam. To better understand this, I think it's time we went on a
Field trip!
Today we're at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, California. They have many great examples of ecosystems here. Here we are on the first floor of the rainforest. We have here Dr. Natalie. She is a botanist, which means she's an expert at the science of plants.
How do plants help our ecosystem?
Plants are really important to our ecosystem. They are the food and the homes for all animals, like birds and butterflies, big animals as well.
How do plants interact with animals?
So plants provide homes for animals. They provide things like nests. They also provide food for animals. We eat plants, but we also have plants that provide food for things like bugs. If you look at these big leaves, bugs are going to eat the leaves. Flowers also provide nectar for birds and butterflies, and they also provide fruits for things like bats and birds as well.
What do you guys think would happen if all of these plants died?
Well, if there's no plants, the animals wouldn't have anything to eat. Why are rainforests important to the world?
That's a good question. It's only about 6% of the world is covered by rainforests, but they produce so much, and that's what we're trying to show here. And things like deforestation and logging really affect these rainforests. And when they produce so much things, like they produce about 40% of the oxygen that we as humans get. So we really need these rainforest to thrive.
So how do humans impact an ecosystem like the rainforest?
Things like bringing invasive species into a rainforest can really upset the balance that we have. So when we introduce those invasive species, those might actually go for animals that live there. They're going to upset that balance.
So, what makes a healthy ecosystem?
We really need this balance. So we need all those different players, all those different parts to make it work.
So if there was a big change in the ecosystem, like it got much colder, that would really affect the entire system, right?
Absolutely. So these plants are really, really important to making these rainforests thrive. So if there's a big change in the climate, that's really going to affect this ecosystem.
Wow, we're underwater. Is this an ecosystem too?
Yeah, this is a freshwater ecosystem. So just like on land, all the different parts of this ecosystem are connected. So things like crabs and tiny shrimp are connected to the fish, and they're connected to the turtles, algae, also some plants as well.
And so the big fish would eat the little fish, and the little fish would eat the shrimp and crabs and things, and they need all this dead wood and places to hide, and so it's all interconnected.
Yeah, just like on land.
Wait. Let me guess. This is an ecosystem too.
Yeah, you're right. This is a saltwater ecosystem. So this is what happens under the ocean. Under the water, all the components are connected as well. So the clams and the sea urchins and the fish, they're all connected in an ecosystem.
So, how do people affect the ecosystem?
People can impact the ecosystem in a good way and a bad way. So a good way is that when we fish, we don't overfish and take too many fish from the ocean. But on the other hand, we can do really bad things like use a lot of fertilizer on land, and that runs off into the oceans, causes an algal bloom, which kills a lot of animals in the ocean.
Can you guys think of any examples of how the living things in this ecosystem, like the fish, interact with the non-living things, like the rocks?
Well, the fish could hide under the rocks for shelter.
Or hide under the sand to avoid predators.
Yes.
That's right. Just like on land, in the ocean, living things and non-living things are all interconnected. Izzy,
What happens if there's a dramatic change in the ecosystem?
well, one of three things can happen. Either the plants and animals can survive and they live where they used to live. Another thing that can happen is that they can die, or the plants and animals can move to somewhere where it's more suitable for them to live.
Now, to see how the ecosystem can affect us and can be affected by us, let's go to some real-world science. To us, this looks like an average garden, but if you look closer, you'll see that so many living things depend on it for survival. Flowers produce nectar and pollen, which is the main diet for birds, bees, and other insects. In turn, those birds and insects transfer pollen between flowering plants, which means the plants can make seeds and reproduce. Trees that have rough bark with crevices and cracks can provide shelter for bugs and small lizards. At the same time, the limbs of the tree provide shelter for larger animals like birds or squirrels, who then can survive by eating the bugs. Even this small puddle here can be an entire ecosystem all by itself, filled with living things like algae, worms, or insects. In every ecosystem, some organisms can survive well, some less well, and some can't survive at all.